In this video, we'll take a look at the macro pattern forming for Bitcoin. We'll look at the risks associated with this pattern and the rewards that can come from this pattern. So make sure you've hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to be updated with all of the TA on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and for your macro view of the real estate and economic cycle. Let's dive in. Huge thanks to today's video sponsor, an exchange that I use for my altcoin trading, that is KuCoin. They're giving away 1 BTC and $100,000 to the king of KuCoin API trading. All the details to the KuCoin promo are in the link in the video description. Use that link to sign up to KuCoin to go in the draw to win up to 1 BTC and 100 grand's worth of USDT as the king of KuCoin. KuCoin is also a great place for tons of altcoin gems. They sometimes get released there before other exchanges. And of course, they're centralized, so they're a little easier to use for beginners than decentralized exchanges. Make sure you check out their risk disclosure in the video description. I'll leave a link to that as well. Turning to the charts, and we'll start with the NASDAQ. And we'll overlay Bitcoin on the NASDAQ to see how closely correlated they are. We went into detail on this a little more in yesterday's video, so check that out after this video. There'll be links at the end of this video to see that. Basically, we were looking at if Bitcoin could reach $1 million. Now, the correlation is pretty well still spot on. Of course, that was only in the last 24 hours, but you can see as the NASDAQ heads up, so does Bitcoin. The moves themselves in percentages are obviously going to be far different. Bitcoin is moving a lot more than the NASDAQ, but in terms of ups and downs, they tend to work in sync most of the time. Now, if Bitcoin is to take the place of gold, we don't want to see Bitcoin moving in sync with the NASDAQ. So hopefully over time, this gets uncorrelated, but at the moment, this is still correlated. And so if we do see the NASDAQ fall, hit some resistance at higher prices here, fade out at its 50% level. So if we take our tool, drop it to the bottom, to the top, and we start to see the market get rejected at these levels, then we could see the NASDAQ drop. And if the correlation is still high between Bitcoin and the NASDAQ at that time, then we could possibly expect Bitcoin to also fall. So that price point that I'm looking for on the NASDAQ is $14,500 if this low remains. So this low at the moment is the 18th of April. And so that just brings us up to the halfway point between the current low and the current top. As for Bitcoin, over the last 24 hours, we've seen it move 1.7%. Now, the halfway points for Bitcoin using the low on the 18th, which came in on some reasonable volume that it's seen over the last 7 days, but nothing substantially huge in comparison to the last couple of months, and in particular the 24th of February, which was the Russia invasion of Ukraine. That was the low that came in, the reversal, but we did see a nice reversal pattern yesterday. So the volume, okay for a mid-turning point. And in terms of the next resistance level for Bitcoin, we're looking at 43,400. So we want a nice simple round number, call it 44,000. But even if we did hit the 44K, there's still a lot of overhead resistance. We can see we had tops at 45,000, 46, and then that recent top at 48,000. So I'm not getting anywhere near excited until Bitcoin reaches over $52,000 and consolidates above that level. However, not to shit on anyone's party here, there is of course a lot of altcoins that can still move in between this and give us some sort of gains at that point in time. We're looking at the weekly chart of Bitcoin. Now we can see this sort of pattern forming. You can see that the market's trending up. We're getting some higher lows. We're getting some higher highs. The thing that I'm concerned with based on Gann analysis and Wyckoff analysis is of course the volume. So the volume is really starting to dry up as the market creeps higher, and the market pricing is also repeating on itself quite a lot. So it's grinding up quite slowly. You can see the price moves up, comes all the way back and tests those prices. So it's almost as if the buyers aren't so sure that the low is in yet. So they keep buying, they buy it up, and then they come back and test the prices lower. You see it happen again and again and again, and we've come all the way back. Obviously, the nice positive here is that we've had higher lows. But if we're to get a move up, we really need to see a move higher and then a short pullback before a breakout on volume. So that's what we need to see to break this pattern. And some of you might see this pattern and know that it looks like a bear flag. Essentially, you've got your pole here, and you'd use that whole to give you an idea of a price target. So if I use the entire range, that would be a bit of a crazy range to me. We're going to measure this from the breakout of the bear flag. They could give you some sort of target of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So I don't think that is a likely scenario for Bitcoin unless we got something worse than the COVID scare in March of 2020. I don't think anything like that is coming up in the next few months or few years, that's for sure. So I would probably say that this is not a possibility. I can't see target 1 happening. As for target 2, we can take a smaller range. So just using the top here at 52, that's going to be an important level for the market to overcome. So I'm going to use 52 as the high, and then the low is the current low that's at around 32,900, so call it 33 grand. So that's about a 19K move. For nice round numbers, we'll call it a $20,000 move to the downside. So again, this is just going to be placed wherever that breakout is to the downside. So in case this market runs up to the 50% point, which is what we looked at on this chart here, looking at where the market could run up to, being around that 43 or 44,000. So if it did run up and get rejected at that point, that would look like a move like this on the macro time frame, or at least on the weekly chart, where then we could have a rejection bringing us in a lower high, and then the market break this structure to the downside. So that's what I'd be keeping an eye on for, to see if this bear flag will play out to the downside, and then look for a target. So like an entry price. So I've got my entry up here, and then I would look for a target further down, being target 2. And so I'm just using this range here for some sort of breakout area. So if the market does break out early May or even later May, it's going to depend on where that is, but just for argument's sake, we'll leave it around here. Well, that target side comes down to around 20,000. And I think that's sounding a little bit more realistic, but also unrealistic for the perma bulls, where they don't think that these lows will get broken, but the bears probably, well, the perma bears probably think that we'll go somewhere around these current levels, or the previous levels of 2020, being around $8,000 to $12,000. Those numbers are often thrown around there, especially by perma bears, so permanent bears. So that's a sort of target that would probably shock the bears, that it won't reach that level, but this level at 20 grand will also shock the perma bulls. So I'm just looking for targets in terms of market sentiment where I think it could shock the market in both directions and then pull up short, because it won't get to the extreme figure that the perma bears think will happen, but it'll also shock the bulls because they never thought that these lows would be broken, because of all the stories that we hear. Elon Musk was buying Bitcoin at 30 grand. Michael Saylor buys Bitcoin at 30 grand. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that the market will hold up at those levels just because people have bought the price at that level before. So that's target 2, around that 20 grand. Now, I've also got a 50% level so that I don't get greedy in a trade. We often look at 50%. That's pretty much what I base a lot of my trading on, looking at these 50% levels, because they happen so often in the market. And if a 50% level is to come up, well, then I can use this range, which is the 52 grand to 33 grand, and then split that in half and use that from the entry point. So wherever that entry point may be along this uptrend. So if that channel happened to come out at 40 grand or 38 grand, for example, then 50% of the move down was $9,500, being that it was a 19 grand move. Let's use 10 grand as a round number. So the entry's at 38, and then we could expect a potential target of around $28,000. So none of this has to come true. It doesn't have to happen exactly. But in terms of a trade, that's what I'd be looking for the Bitcoin breakdown of a bear flag, which unfortunately, this is what it's currently working out to be at the moment. So target 2 is somewhere around that sort of mid-20s to high $20,000. Earlier, I spoke briefly about how I could be wrong on this, and what I would look for is if the 50% level broke, which is around that $44,000, we got a higher low forming, and then the market moved its way up, took out the $48,000 to $50,000, which of course is going to be huge exuberance for the rest of the market. We've moved to a new high. The $50,000 psychological level has been met as well. So that obviously plays into the market psychology and that bullish sentiment that just spins a flurry on YouTube and on Twitter. And provided it continues up and breaks the critical level of $52,000, then I would say that this has been invalidated and we were bullish all along. But until that happens, I don't believe that we have any sort of resolution just yet for the macro picture. These scenarios can be a little confusing if you're just starting in the market and you're unsure of how to trade or how much energy you want to put into the market when it comes to actively looking after your investments. But this is what I do on a full-time basis. We've got to understand what's going on to the downside and to the upside, how you would play both directions, what are the probabilities of the market going down in a pattern that looks like this, and what are the probabilities of the market going up? What would happen if this pattern failed? That's the sort of stuff that I look at in more detail in Patreon. Check out the link in the top of the video description if you want to learn more about becoming an active full-time investor. And while you're there, do the good things to those YouTube numbers, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. So as a recap, what I'm looking at here is we have target 1, we have target 2, and then we can break down these targets to 50% levels, which are something that works so often in the market, regardless of whether it is time or if it is price. Now, of course, we can start to see some of these other cryptos having a little bit of a pop off at the moment, but let's recap the targets. Target 1, somewhere crazy. I don't think target 1 is going to happen. I see this as like a multiple choice exam that we have to play here. No one knows what the answer is to this test just yet, but we have to start to cross some of these multiple choices off and then go with that one that might happen and prepare for that answer. Target 1, I doubt it. $5, $6, $7, $8,000. I think there'll be so many people buying up way before then. Target 2, it's a possibility, somewhere around that $20,000 level, those high teens to low $20,000 levels, even if it might just be a wick and a quick flash crash to those levels before it bounces back quickly. That's always a possibility. Something that could get me on side without being too greedy. Maybe I'll look for something around that 50% level of the target 2. So the target 2 for a round number is about $20,000 move from the point that the market breaks this structure. So we're using 38 grand as a round number, and that would be $10,000 down, which brings us out to about $28,000, which conveniently lines up with all these other lows that have come into the market and slightly takes them out. You can see the low that happened January 2021 was 28,800. Then in June 2021, we had 28,900. So I think if those levels were just touched, maybe $25,000, $26,000, $28,000, I reckon that would be a great place to flush out all of the stops that are sitting behind these levels so that we can reset the market and move up again. In terms of a timing, it's going to be difficult to find out when that exactly is. But in terms of the signs we could see if that starts to play out is the market may be coming up and testing some of these levels. It could eventually just break down from where it is. But I think if this pattern began to break down, then we would definitely be coming back to test some of these prices around the mid $30,000 levels. And if it was looking weak as it tested those levels, then we're probably heading back down to find wherever those next massive whale buys are. But for now, we don't see any huge amounts of whale buying activity going on. Of course, there are whales buying. They're buying and selling. They're trading the market like we looked at in yesterday's video, because any sort of small move here of 3 or 5%, if you're leveraged up on a trading platform, even if it's only 10x, 3 or 5% turns out to be 30 or 50%. If you're trading at 100x with very tight stops, of course, multiply this by 100, 300%, 500%. And so that's probably why whales can continue to buy. We'll see it in wallets. Bitcoin wallet 3 is buying 500 Bitcoin at a pop, but we're just not seeing that much come into the market because I'm not sure if we're ready to move up yet, because some of these stops may need to be tested. And as always, if we're wrong, we will know, because the market will break this structure and start to work its way higher. That's the risks I'm looking out for with Bitcoin and this bearish structure. However, there are opportunities to be made from the short side and the long side of the market. Be sure to check out the link to KuCoin is in the video description. And of course, if you want to be a member of our TIA Lite, check out the Patreon link down below as well. Like, subscribe. See you guys at the next video. Check out this video coming up right now, and I'll see you at the next one. Till then, have more fun to get more done.